Okay, moving on into 1.4. This is the first video in that section where we will be multiplying positive and negative numbers, and it is pretty easy. So let's take a look at that. Do you recall that multiplication is just repeated addition? So we covered that, I think, back in section R1 where we were talking about exponents. So if we take a look, I've got some problems here. We are taking a look, first of all, just at 3 times 4. We know that that's 12. But remember that 3 times 4 means 4 plus 4 plus 4. You're adding 4 3 times. That's where the repeated addition comes in. So either way, you multiply or you add, you're going to get the answer of 12. Now, we'll recall these two numbers are both positive and we get a positive answer. So, though one example doesn't make a rule, I'll just tell you it always works like this. When you have a positive times a positive, you're going to get a positive, and that should be no surprise. The next case I'm going to put off for just a second, and let's go down to the third case. We're multiplying what number? Well, that is a positive 3 times a negative 4. Using repeated addition again, that just means we have 3 negative 4s that we're adding together, and there you see it right there, negative 4 plus negative 4 plus negative 4, and you would get, as your answer, if you added all those up, a negative 12. So there's our answer. So now we see that, and this works for all of them. A positive times a negative gives us a negative. And the last example, negative 3 times 4. Well, I can't really write down a negative 3 of 4, so I'm going to have to just change that to 4 times a negative 3, which we know is the same thing. So we have negative 3 added to itself 4 times, and if we added all of that up, we would end up with a negative 12. So we see that a negative times a positive is a negative. Okay, going back to this second example, let's put a little red rectangle around it. Well, we can't use repeated addition here, but I'm going to revert back to, remember when we talked about negatives, and I said that it can also stand for opposites. And opposites with that negative sign just flip things around on the number line. So we agree that we're going to get 12 as an answer. Okay, now what about the sign? This one, the first negative, flips everything to the left-hand side. So that's one negative, flips things to the left-hand side of 0, and then the second negative involved is going to flip it back. So 2 negatives give you a positive. Okay, so we've got 2 negatives give us a positive. And I've sort of separated these two ideas, and what we want to try to do is to put it in as few words as possible, and I'm going to create a little bit of space here. What's true about the first two examples when we multiplied a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative? What's true about those signs? Yeah, they're both signs are the same. And now remember, we're in multiplication now. Differs from addition. So when the signs are the same, although in this case it's the same, but when the signs are the same and you're multiplying, your answer is going to be positive. So signs are the same. It's always going to give you a positive answer when you're multiplying. And in the second case, we have signs are different. It's a positive times a negative or a negative times a positive. It doesn't really matter. Your answer is going to be negative. Okay, let's take a look at a few more examples. The nice thing about multiplication and its cousin division, you can do the signs and then you can do the numbers separately. So in the first case, what's going to be the sign of our answer? A negative times a positive? Let's just do signs for a second. In the second one, we've got a positive times a negative. Signs are different. The answer is going to be negative. Third case, a negative times a negative. Signs are the same. So our answer is going to be positive. And in the last case, oh yeah, we know this. A positive times a positive is going to give us a positive. So we can determine the signs, and let's just finish this off with the answers. 54, 20, 20, and 21. Oh, since The signs really are the only thing that we need to look at to determine the sign of our answer. I've just written these problems, long ones, giving the signs of the answers. So let's take a look at what happens here. We've got a positive and a negative. That's going to be, negative. Let me get there. A negative. And then this negative and this negative is going to give me a positive. And then this positive and this negative is going to give me negative. So let's see. This could go on. A negative and a positive is a negative and this negative is going to be positive. A positive and this negative is going to be negative. Are you getting a headache here? Okay, let's just say this is getting a little bit complicated. Let's try it a different way. So we know, let's just take a look at the negatives. We know every pair of negatives is going to give us a positive. So there's a positive. There's another pair of negatives, which is going to be positive. Another pair of negatives. And another pair of negatives. So what we're going to end up with is a positive times 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 a positive. So all we've got left here is positive, so our answers are going to be positives. Likewise, in the bottom, let's pair them up. Positive. This guy's going to have to reach a little bit. Positive. Oh, but we've got this little guy here. He doesn't have a partner, so he's going to be negative. So essentially what we've got here is we've got all of these positives, but then when you have a negative times a positive is going to be negative. Okay, what's the shortcut here? In the first case, how many negatives did we have? If we count those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we had 8 negatives. What kind of number is 8? It's an even number, which means you're going to have pairs. There's not going to be any little straggler. Every negative is going to pair up. So when the number of negatives is even, you automatically know your answer is going to be positive. Likewise, down here we saw we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 negatives. That's an odd number. And when the number of negatives is an odd number, your answer is going to be negative because you're always going to have that little straggler there. Okay, that's pretty easy, huh? All right, I'll see you in division.